It's a great honor and a privilege to have both. We have Avri and Yardena. Here we are in your beautiful home here in Kfar Masarek. And Yardena, you actually a survivor from Budapest.
Okay, Yardena was a child growing up in Budapest, and until the spring of 1944, there were many limitations within which she lived in the family. But after the German occupation, everything was ruined, and I don't know exactly at what time she had to move to the ghetto in the Pest section of Budapest. But in any case, at a certain period, she was taken to a brick factory on the road between Budapest and Vienna, still in Budapest, at which Jewish women, girls, maybe even men, elderly, were collected or kept until deportation. But since it was already at the time when deportations to Auschwitz were ceased already, and I'm talking about November, December 1944, the inhabitants of that temporary place at the brick factory were somehow chased to move westbound on the road between Budapest and Vienna towards the Austrian border. And Yardena, as a child, at that time her name was Marta, was among them, and she, together with her grandmother, started their way towards the west without knowing the name of the destination where they are going. And as they were marching together with others, with their small belongings on their backs or in their hands, Yardena didn't know where they go. She was at that time still a young child. All of a sudden came her mother's second husband, her stepfather, who was not a Jewish person, who wore the Hungarian uniform. And he probably knew that she was on the way to Austria. He located Yardena, Marta, his stepdaughter, within the marching columns, and said to the guards around, "She is my daughter, how come she is here?" And he grabbed her out of the lines of the marching and saved her. Yardena hesitated, Marta hesitated at that time, because she didn't want to leave her grandmother, with whom she went hand by hand. But her grandmother, who probably knew much more than Marta, the child, knew, said to her, "You go with your dad. I will keep going." And that was the last time she saw her. Her grandmother disappeared from her eyes, and she returned together with her stepfather to Budapest. In Budapest, she came probably to the apartment in which the family lived. That part of the history is not completely clear because we have no witnesses. But shortly after that, sometime in December, neighbors of the family of Marta's, Yardena's mother, and her second husband, whose name was Spiegelberger, told about them to the Hungarian or either Hungarian or German authorities, that Mrs. Spiegelberger is a Jewish woman, her mother. And her mother was grabbed out of her home and taken to the Danube and killed alongside with other Jewish women and others in the Pest side of Hungary. I don't know whether you know about the sculpture of shoes. It may have been on that very spot, maybe at another spot. Nobody could ever notice who were the exact persons who were killed there. But after the war, Yardena heard from her stepfather and from her mother's brother who survived the war that she was killed on the banks of the Danube. And later on, her stepfather married another woman. Yardena decided, together with other boys and girls, to join a Zionist youth movement. They spent some months in a southeastern town of Hungary called Békéscsaba, near the Romanian border, where they were accommodated in some children's homes with preparation towards Aliyah to Israel. In 1946, they moved to Germany, where they were in one of the DP camps, in which they got Zionist education. They were taught Jewish history of Israel or Palestine, Hebrew, and so on and so forth. And then in 1947, they were taken by trucks from that South German town to southern France, and they departed on the Exodus ship to Israel in July 1947.
Story.
Such a, and here's the
story.
Mm.
This is a story. Yes.
Yeah, and in 47 they were expelled back to. First they wanted them to embark in France, but since the refusal of those who were on the two or three boats, they were taken to northern Germany, where they spent more months until the establishment of Israel. And in 1948, May, they came to the newly established state of Israel. Yardena came to Kibbutz Kfar Masaryk, at which she lives until today.
And that's where you both met.
Story.
And Yardena, can I just ask, how does it feel knowing that you were on the Exodus?
It was not. When people were there, they did not feel that they make history.
Because you did make history.
They were so stuck to each other. 4,500 people together in a rather small boat, you know. It is like being sardines in a box.
No.
So I never heard about any unusual experiences, except the one that close to Haifa, when they were surrounded by British flagships and so on, they threw whatever they had, potatoes or so, at the British soldiers. And that was one of the deeds of heroism Yardena committed at that time. Throwing conserved food at the British soldiers on the boats around. But that didn't help them. And the fate of Exodus is better known from other sources than of those who were children at that time.
And were you our only
That's a
child?
historia, no?
Were you our only child? Or?
No, at that time she was a part of a group of...
No, but did you have siblings, brothers or sisters?
Not there. Not there. She had a sister who came on a separate way, not connected with the Exodus, not so whatsoever.
And can I just ask, when you went back to Budapest and you went to the Danube, it must have been very difficult or emotional to think that here where the monument is, where...
You're talking about our visits in Budapest?
When you went back, was it difficult? Was it difficult to go back?
Her cousin helps us a lot to locate places at which she was, what he heard from his parents. What happened to her in 45-6 until she left Hungary, we had a good source of information in her cousin who is younger than her, but he collected his information from his parents. And he told us in Hungarian, which we translated from Hungarian to Hebrew to our son's daughter and their children, and to our friends as well, because some of our friends are so much interested in our own history that they decided to ask us to take them on a tour.
Wow.
From here. We were 5 couples, 4, 5 or whatever, yeah, most of whom were born in Israel. And I guided a tour which started in the Czech Republic, which was just a sightseeing tour. It was not a tour of history. But as we crossed the border into Slovakia, and then from Slovakia to Hungary, it became a tour of testimonies of Yardena and myself. And they were very moved by what they heard at each spot at which we visited, in a place which I prepared beforehand with a driver and a little minibus which took us from one place to another. So.
And can I ask, did you keep contact with your stepfather?
He died very early after that. In 1940, yeah, she corresponded with him. Abba Mehmet Shelach. In 51, he got ill, and he died at a young age in 1951, 52, 2-3 years after Yardena made Aliyah. She corresponded with him in Hungarian, and only years later we met his son from his second marriage, who is not related to Yardena,
yeah.
but we visited him, and he and his wife visited us.
That's
here.
wonderful. So you've kept the connection.
We are not in a very close relationship with them, but the fact that we met is a very satisfying one.
Wow.
Yeah, support.
It's unbelievable. It really is. And can I just ask, your stepfather, he put his life in danger, but he really did when he came to collect you. It wasn't a simple thing to do.
I don't know how he got to know that she is on that march.
It was the death march.
Yeah, that's one of the death marches. I mean, you know, death march is a very wide, broad term. איך נודע לאבא החורג שלך שאת נמצאת בצעדת המוות מבודפסט, מבית החרושת ללבנים לכיוון אוסטריה? I don't know how he got to know it. How he got there just on the day Yardena was there. Because if he came to the place, maybe the next march of 500 or 1,000 women went on their way, and Yardena was already maybe 10 kilometers west of it, further. It's a coincidence which was so crucial.
It's min hashamayim. It's all. It was meant to be. It was meant to be.
It's a coincidence which one can hardly imagine. Maybe people who write, novels and books could somehow invent realities like that. But it is like a fantasy.
It's incredible. Thank God he was there, and thank God he saved you. And
but she never heard about the fate of her grandmother.
That must have been very difficult.
Yeah, that's grandmother disappeared. Maybe she fell on the road and they just shot her. Maybe she was not even buried. Maybe she went on until she got to the place where they started working. And she, being a person who at that time, a person of 60, was considered already a very old person. Maybe she just died out of hunger, maybe out of tiredness, exhaustion, who knows. But many perished like that way.
And was it not possible for your stepfather to save your mother? When they came to collect her,
It was impossible to do so. He tried to get them, and they stopped him. I mean, they stood between him and her after Yardena was already with him, and said she should go.
Wow, it's so sweet. And can I ask, it's a difficult question, but who do they think did the killing by the Danube? Was
The
it
Hungarians.
the Hungarians, not the Germans?
Hungarians, yeah, they were cruel. Sometimes, from testimonies I read and heard, many of them were much worse than the SS men in Hungary. Anti-Semites, their blood was fed up with anti-Semitism and hatred of Jews, which cannot be described. This is what I learned from people who survived and who met many of them. I had heard from people who, most of whom are longer alive, who in their underground activities wore the uniform of those Arrow Cross people, which is the counterpart of SS in Hungary. They participated in instructions they were given about how to collect the Jews, and they told us terrible stories about it. And of course, it can be read in many testimonies, I guess. Some 5 years ago, I translated from Hungarian into Hebrew memoirs of a woman who was a nurse in a Jewish hospital in Budapest during the expulsion of Jews, and she writes about how these Hungarian Arrow Cross men cruelly behaved towards Jews. And it is, I don't recall exactly the name of the book, or it's much less than a book, 30, 40 pages testimony, but I remember how I was how would I say, shocked by what I read in that Hungarian source. By the way, until this day, I still keep translating testimonies, and not only some books of history and so on, from the Slovak and Hungarian languages, as well as English. I don't know whether you know a book about Jewish women in Ravensbrück. You know the book?
I've seen it, yeah.
There's an American author of the book, which she published. What's her name? Seidman or something like that. And I translated it from the English into Hebrew, and it was published by Yad Vashem together with Ghetto Fighters Museum here in Kibbutz, the Lochamei Ghetto. So I keep doing this work of translation until this very day. I lately translated a book from Slovak by an author who survived 3 years in Auschwitz, from 42 until 45. And she wrote about her experiences, and that book was discovered by one of the Israeli historians, whose name is Hannah Yablonka. I don't know whether you met her name. She deals with the history of the Holocaust, and she asked me to translate that book from the Slovak into Hebrew. It was not published as yet, but it is going to be published soon by Yediot Achronot together with Yad Vashem. So I keep being active in that field as well.
So I just for 1 minute, I really have to thank you both. Well, no, Avri, if you can sit as well.
ביחד.
Just one little second.
Yeah.
So I'll just be here.
Okay.
So I just it's such an honor to be with both of you and somebody who was on the Exodus. Something.
Yeah.
It's
So she's both a Holocaust survivor and the Exodus survivor.
So I cannot thank you
מזל
enough.
בחיים.
It's. You should both just have mazel bracha and
Bracha.
Raven stream in good
Thank you.
health.
And mazel
thank you
bracha.
so much.
To you and your family as well.
Wow.
Thank you
באמת,
very much.
Thank you.
in kol halev, really. There are no words to thank you. באמת תודה רבה.
תודה רבה.